All right, FightHype.com here with one of the best trainers in the heavyweight division in all the world, former Olympic silver medalist Kevin Berry, trainer of Joseph Parker. Kevin, I got to ask you, Andy Ruiz shockingly became the heavyweight champion of the world, unified. How does it feel for you that Joe is the only guy that defeated him? That's the only loss on the current heavyweight champion's record.
Well, obviously it's a great victory for us to have, but more than that, myself, Joe, my son Taylor, and our team, we're thrilled for Andy. Andy he's one of the good guys in boxing. He's got a great family. He's got a heavyweight heart, and I know how good Andy Ruiz is. I studied him in depth. I had Joseph Parker in his very first year with me sparring Andy, and Andy'd been a pro for 3 years at the time, and he was all over Joe for a start. There was a chance I was going to be working with Andy before I started working with Joe, so Andy and I go back a long way. Great hand speed for a heavyweight, great durability, and a guy who just believed in himself and fought a terrific fight.
So the outcome really, is it fair to say it wasn't really shocking from where you're at because...
Well, I think we were all shocked.
Okay,
I just don't think I was shocked quite as much as most other people.
Well, it's because, after you defeated Andy to win the WBO belt with Joe, you were always so complimentary of him, and so was Joe. But I to be honest, we didn't know whether to say, okay, well, they're praising a guy that they defeated, but it kind of wound up coming to fruition, all the good things you said about Andy years ago.
And you've heard me say it, and you've interviewed me many times before, and a lot of those questions have been in regards to Andy Ruiz. Here's a guy that's been boxing since he was 6 years old. He's always been the short guy. He's always had to learn and perfect his skill working against much taller opponents with much longer reach. So there was nothing new for him to be fighting a 6'6" giant with an 84-inch reach. Andy had been there. He'd had to work against that all his career.
And well, not to discredit Andy, but how much from what you saw, Kevin, had to do with Joshua's lack thereof, lack of performance, or what was he just beaten by a better fighter?
Well, I'll tell you what, there were a lot of funny signs on the night, and I remember we sat in the second row, and the body language of Joshua walking to the ring was something I hadn't seen before. Then he got into the ring, and for 4 or 5 minutes he was profusely chewing on his mouth guard. Again, something that we'd never seen him do before. Then all of a sudden he walked backwards into his corner and had one of his corner men work on both sides of his neck for about 1.5 minutes. And I said to Joe, there's something amiss here. There is something wrong. This is not, this just doesn't feel right to me. And as it worked out, I think we were right in our assumptions before the fight began. And of course, there's been so many stories come out afterwards. You'd be a fool to believe them all. But
one was that he got knocked out in sparring before the fight.
And then they talked about that he had had a panic attack in the dressing room. Well, for a start off, we know that the New York Commission are very, very strict, and if that was the case, there is no way that they would have let him walk to the ring. But there were stories about him sneaking out. There were stories about him, underestimating Andy Ruiz, and they definitely underestimated Andy's power. We widely told all the media there at our press conference on the Friday that Joe said throughout his career the hardest he was ever hit in a fight was by Andy Ruiz, including his fight with Joshua.
Right.
Because Joshua never really tagged him. So we knew that Andy could punch, and I think Joshua, looking at the Dimitrenko fight 5 weeks earlier, and Dimitrenko is a shadow of the fighter he was, and within 5 rounds, Andy couldn't put him on the floor. And Joe had him down 4 times in 3 rounds, and Brian Jennings had him down 3 times. So there was a whole lot of question marks there, and I think Joshua thought, well, God, if he can't knock Dimitrenko down, he ain't knocking me down. But we know that he's got heavy hands. And of course, he helped his chances by using those heavy hands, by letting his hands go. If you're fighting a guy who's got reach and height advantage against you, and you stay on the outside and you let him jab your head off and go into a defensive mode, you can't win. But Andy wanted to increase his chances of winning by letting his hands go. I think that in hindsight, and hindsight's a wonderful thing. When Joshua clipped him with the right uppercut, left hook in the third round, he would love a redo of his follow-up, because he recklessly ran in and started exchanging, and we all know, one of the most dangerous times is when you have a hurt fighter, where he's desperate, where he's fighting for his life. And Andy had just picked himself up off the canvas, and I'm pretty sure he had never ever been there before. And he came out swinging, and Joshua stepped into the close zone rather than trying to line him up with a straight punch from the outside. So that, I think, was a very, very foolish thing for him to do.
Were the kind of balls that Ruiz showed and just letting his hands go as soon as he got hurt, was that almost old school? Reminded you of the old great fighters? Because like you said, when you get hurt, that's when you're so dangerous. But a lot of guys now, when they get hurt,
they go into a shell.
Yes.
Look, I think one of the strengths of Andy Ruiz, because he has had to give away so much height and reach throughout his career, is his counter-punching skills. He would block a punch, he would come straight back. And I think there was one stage, I believe it was in the 7th round, where because Joshua had clipped him in the 3rd round with the left hook, and he had hit him with another left hook after that, and I think he was thinking, the left hook's my punch. He was leading with left hooks, and Andy caught his hook and came back with a hook of his own, and he was on Queer Street. So like Andy's a very, very smart fighter, and he made good choices, and I think he was very well cornered in that fight. And look, to be honest, I think Anthony Joshua was very well cornered, because if you listen to the commentary and the advice from Robert McCracken, even after the 3rd round, Robert said, okay, look, you're okay. So, he calmed him down. He said, I want you to get him behind that long jab. Okay, work your 1-2. Keep him on the outside by hitting him with that right hand. And then I think it was about the 5th round, he said, okay, get your 1-1-2 going. Straight punches, using your strengths, fight from the outside, fight like a big man. Don't fight him in the middle zone. Don't try to get up close with him, because that's Andy's territory.
But that's usually Joshua's territory too, right? Despite him being 6'6", he's usually pretty good on the inside.
But not when you've picked yourself up twice off the canvas in the 3rd round. I think that's a good reason to listen to your corner and to fight to your strengths.
Should he get his rematch, Joshua, will he be able to win the fight and implement those kind of adjustments he needs to make, like you're talking about? Do you think he's capable and will do it?
Look, most definitely. I think he's a smart guy. He's a good learner. He's a terrific physical specimen. And he has a very professional team around him. I think if at Sheffield, when he's training there, things seem to be so much more in place for him. A lot of the media from the UK who I spoke with, a lot of them put a lot of emphasis on the fact that this is not the UK, and the fight that, because we're fighting here in Madison Square Garden, this is a lot of pressure for Joshua. Things aren't the same. He's not used to this. He had a routine, everything was in place, he felt comfortable, and he was on top of his game in the UK. I think he won't be in a hurry to come back and fight in the US.
Even if that's where he has to fight Ruiz, if that's his...
Look, I'd bet the house that the fight will be in the UK.
Who would you bet the house on to win? Well, maybe not the house, but if you were a betting man, who do you think wins?
I tell you what, styles make fights, and Andy Ruiz is going to have twice as much confidence coming into the rematch. And I also think that with the long preparation, I think you'd see a more conditioned, a more prepared Andy Ruiz as well. And he's going to be hard to beat in the rematch. But look, I've always been a big supporter of the boxer. I've seen it with the likes of Lennox Lewis and Klitschko, where they've come unstuck by making the wrong choices in fights. and then corrected the style, and then come back and had, you know, very decisive victories. You know, this needs to be one of those sort of things for Joshua. Look, I'm just happy that you know, Andy's in a position now where, you know, he's going to be set up for the rest of his life.